Remember that freak I fought last time? The one who nearly buried me alive?
Am I gonna have to dig you out of the rubble again?
Not this time. He's sung his last, and the pod's ours.
Hey, what's up everybody? This is Osterberg501 and today I want to go over my challenge tier 15 Devastator Bleed build in Outriders. Now before we get into the video, only 6% of people that watch my videos are subscribed to my channel. So make sure to subscribe if you want to keep up with all of my videos. Now I have been able to get gold on a few maps with this build with all of these items. But with that in consideration, this still isn't a god rolled build. There are definitely multiple items that I need to change out to get better rolls. All of my items aren't level 50 yet. All of them don't have maxed out stats yet. So this is a pretty good ways away from being an absolute god rolled build. But like I said, I can do some of the challenge tier 15 maps on gold and most of the other ones I can still do on silver. So first I want to go over the abilities. This build is an anomaly power focused build. First we have Earthquake, which is our main spamming damage ability. We currently have 3 charges of it. Does a ton of damage in a big cone in front of us. It also is going to apply bleeds with some of our mods, which is one of the big synergies of our build. Next we have Golem, which is a damage reduction, but it is also to synergize with one of our class skill points. So mainly for those 2 specific things. Then we have Impale, which is kind of our big burst damage ability. And it is very good for taking down elite enemies. Currently it has 2 charges and affects up to 3 enemies. This will also apply bleed. When we impale something, it gives us armor and health bonuses. And as you'll see in some of the footage, it does an absolutely ridiculous amount of damage when synergizing with everything else in our build. Next, for our class tree, we have anomaly power, cooldown reduction to seismic abilities, so our impale and our earthquake. We have more anomaly power. We have reduces protection cooldowns, so for our golem. And this is the main reason we're using Golem. When we use a protection ability, we get 45% anomaly power bonus for 10 seconds. So once we pop Golem, not only is it a massive damage reduction to us, it's a very big damage increase to the damage we're putting out. Increase resistance piercing by 15%, increase anomaly power. Then we have extend the distance considered to be close range by an additional 4 meters. Then increase your armor by 7% for each enemy in close range. This massively increases our survivability and synergizes with some other of these class talent points. Then we have reduced seismic skills cooldown by another 15% for earthquake and impale. More anomaly power, increases damage to enemies below 30% health, increases anomaly power, increases our bleed damage by 30%. Then we have your healed by 25% of your bleed damage. This is one of the most important parts of this build. This is the vast majority of the healing and survivability of this build is healing off of our bleed damage. Then we have skill life leech, increases your armor bonus by 40% of your anomaly power. So this is massive for increasing our survivability because we're going to have so much anomaly power. Then we have increases your armor by 20% and resistance by 20% for 10 seconds after your skills end. This will be up essentially 100% of the time because of us going a lot into cooldown reduction as well. Then we have increases your resistance piercing by 15% and then increases seismic skills base damage by 50%. So our earthquake and impale are our main damage abilities. And the reason we're not going into any increases to our bleed duration is because this build is built around being able to apply bleeds with our abilities and then having massive cooldown reduction to constantly use our abilities. So you really don't have to worry about having bleed applied to enemies. Also, if you're at that small window of time between when your ability is coming up and enemies not having bleed, say on a boss, you can always just melee them. Melee does a decent bit of damage and it'll apply bleed on it if you need to apply bleed in between that small window where you might not have bleed on an enemy because your cooldowns are still not up. So for our weapons, the main thing I'm using as my primary weapon is Thunderbird. Some of the main reasons it has a status power buff, so that's really good because we have a lot of damage and bleed. The mod that comes on this weapon is Ultimate Storm Whip, where it just keeps proccing lightning on targets you shoot, and this lightning is increased by your anomaly power. So level 50 is dealing 75,000 damage baseline, and pretty much anything that increases our anomaly power or our damage is going to increase that as well. You'll see sometimes that this thing is proccing for 250,000 plus damage, which is pretty pretty nuts. And then the mod that we have rolled on this is Fortress. Receive up to a 43% damage bonus based on your armor. Now this is also one of the reasons we're going a ton into armor in our class talents, because this doesn't give, say, a firepower bonus or anomaly power bonus or anything like that. This is just damage increase. So it increases our bleed damage, it increases our other mods damage, it increases our ability damage, it increases just all of your damage. And with how much armor we have, this is going to be a massive damage increase, and it's just when you have the weapon out. So just having this weapon out with how we have our class talent points put in, this is going to give us a massive damage increase to everything. And then the secondary weapon I'm using is Death Shield. Now this is the weapon that comes with Fortress, so it has Fortress on it, so when I'm switching to this, all of my other stuff is still having that increased damage. And then I rolled Ravenous Locust on this. Shots create a swarm that deals 200,000 damage over 10 seconds and inflicts weakness to that target and everything around it. Now mainly for my secondary weapon, what I'm looking for is anything that has a long cooldown but a very strong effect. So this has a cooldown of 8 seconds and it lasts for 10 seconds. So I can just switch to my Death Shield, hit an enemy with it, it's now doing this big AoE damage for 10 seconds, switch back to my Thunderbird and use my Thunderbird for that 10 seconds and then switch to my Death Shield, one more shot, switch back. That's essentially what I'm looking for in my secondary weapon. There are some other mods that I think may be a little bit better, but this Ravenous Locust is still a very good mod for that use. For my armor pieces, this is probably the weakest part of my build right now, because my gloves and boots, even though because of these I do get the tier set bonus of the tier set we're using, but these aren't well rolled pieces. So these are the main things I'm going to be replacing. Now the main stats I want for this build are going to be what's on my chest and legs. It's going to be anomaly power, cooldown reduction, status power, and then the fourth best stat is going to be skill life leech, just to give some extra healing. But the top 3 stats are by far the best 3 stats for this build, and the 3 stats you're going to want to be focusing on. So I want to go over the boots and gloves first, because these are the main pieces I want to be changing. So like I said, we do have the Seismic Commander's tier set, which increases damage towards enemies with bleed by 50%. This just massively synergizes with everything else we're doing in the build, applying bleed to everything, healing off bleed. Now everything with bleed takes a lot more damage, which includes taking damage from bleed. And another one of the reasons I still have these boots and gloves is because of the mods on these pieces. This build is very heavily dependent on having a lot of class specific mods on it to buff up the damage, allow more charge of the abilities, etc. So like I said, boots and gloves don't have well rolled stats, so we don't really need to go over that. The mods for this: Earthquake, the skill can be activated one more time. This is massive because that's our main spamming ability. Pretty much when the ability comes up, you spam all 3 charges out and it does a ton of damage. Then Sharpen Spike, for Impale, the skill deals 100,000 more damage. This is scaling with anomaly power. And like I said, Impale is our really big bursty damage ability, especially for elite enemies. You'll see in the video that my Impales, when I have everything up, I pop Golem to get a damage boost, I bleed on the enemies. Impale will commonly deal over 500,000 damage to 3 different enemies, so it's a massive damage increase. Then for our glove mods, again with the boots, the stats aren't well rolled, so we don't need to go over those. We have Impaler, the skill can be activated one more time before triggering the cooldown for Impale, so now our Impale can be used twice. Massive, like I said, a massive burst ability. Then Ground Crush increases skill's damage of Earthquake by 67,000, scaling off of anomaly power. Again, massive. We want our Earthquake, which is a really low cooldown ability and our main spamming ability, we want that to do as much damage as possible, and that's a massive damage increase. Also, that ability can hit a lot of enemies. It's a pretty big cone in front of you, so it's a very good AoE ability as well. Then Seismic Commander's leg armor. Now these are god rolled pieces, and legendaries all have statically rolled stats on them, so like the gloves and the boots, I'll have to switch these to either other legendary items or other epic items, because these will always have the same stats. The good thing about these set is that the legs and the chest piece have god rolled stats. Anomaly power, status power, cooldown reduction are 3 top stats that I want for this build are on this piece, so god rolled in the stat department. And the legs are very important as well. Increases damage dealt to enemies afflicted by bleed by 25%, so that's half of the tier set bonus on just one mod. That's massive. That is the specific mod for these leg pieces, so the legs are an incredibly important part to get this build off of the ground. And then the other mod, Rivers of Blood, increases Impale's damage by 50% to enemies afflicted by bleed, and this is another big one. This is also why, like I said, when we have bleeds on enemies, when we have our damage buffs, Impale's hitting over 500,000 every time, and this is another big reason for that. And it's massive massive burst damage to bosses and elites. Impale is actually our best ability and highest damage towards bosses because it'll just deal so much damage. Then for our chest piece, again, like I said, anomaly power, status power, cooldown reduction, top 3 best stats. And the tier 3 for this is Impale can now strike 2 additional targets. Now this is massive because baseline Impale only strikes 1 target. Now it's more of an AoE ability, hits up to 3 things, and like I said, it does massive burst damage, so now it's dealing that massive burst damage to up to 3 targets. And if I have bleed applied to enemies, this will one-shot pretty much anything besides elite and bosses if a target has bleed on it. Then we have extra quake. Earthquake can be applied 1 additional time, so this mixed with our tier 3 mod from our boots lets us use 3 earthquakes every cooldown, which is massive. That's our main clearing damage ability and the main way we apply bleed. And we apply bleed because our helm here has the mod for earthquake that makes it apply bleed to everything, and that's our main way of applying bleed to all of the targets around us. And this helm is still pretty good, not exactly God Rolled, but still good. Anomaly power, cooldown reduction, top stats. This one has skill life leech instead of status power, but that's still very well rolled because I would say anomaly power and cooldown reduction are the top. Then I would say third best is status power, then fourth is skill life leech. So it's still a well rolled piece, but I could get something slightly better. And the tier 3 for this is decent, grants you firepower and a good amount of anomaly power bonus on skill activation. So that's up 100% of the time, just a decent anomaly power increase. Now I think I could get something slightly better than this mod, but we do have the bleed on earthquake applied to this. So essentially how this build works is you're mainly going to be focusing on applying bleed to everything by the use of your abilities. You're going to want to earthquake things, put bleed on them first, then use your impales, which are going to do massively increased damage to bleeding enemies, spam out the rest of your earthquakes, and then you can use Golem however you want to use it. It is going to give you a massive anomaly power increase, but also it's going to give you a massive damage reduction. Usually I mainly focus on using Golem as a damage increasing ability, so I'll usually pop Golem, use earthquakes to apply bleed to everything, impale twice, spam out the rest of our earthquakes, then get to using our guns. So that is the entirety of my Devastator Bleed build. Subscribe if you want to see more Outriders or other videos. Leave a like if you liked the video. Leave a comment down below what you guys think about this build, and thanks for watching.
You want me to raise your soldiers' morale? There's no one left.
Now you know the fuck I'm dealing with. Artillery support incoming.
That's one of our plots. And naturally it landed on the insurgents' side. Can't let that happen. Remember that freak I fought last time? The one who nearly buried me alive?
Am I gonna have to dig you out of the rubble again?
Not this time. He's sung his last, and the pod's ours.